Hey everybody, welcome to Big Blend Radio's military show where every first Monday we get to chat with military historian Mike Guardia. He's an award-winning author, a historian like I just said, and also a U.S. Army veteran. He is named Author of the Year in 2021 by the Military Writers Society of America. His latest books are The Combat Diaries, True Stories from the Front Lines of World War II, and Coyote Recon, such a good name, The Forgotten Wars of Colonel J.D. Vanderpool. So I encourage you to go to Amazon, type in Mike Guardia. You will find I think something over 20 books. And if you go to MikeGuardia.com, you'll find more there too. But welcome back, Military Mike. How are you?
Hey, Lisa, I'm doing great. Always a pleasure to be on the show.
Hey, today we're talking about Rosie the Riveter, right? And I know that we're going to be, talking about her in March next year, 2024, because, Women's History Month, and there's a Rosie
Right.
the Riveter Day, March 21st next year, and every day, every
Mhm.
year. But Labor Day, this show is airing on Labor Day this year, and I saw somebody like, hey, Rosie the Riveter is a symbol for Labor Day and for just labor as a whole. In this country. And I was like, oh, I never even really thought of it that way. So I
Yeah.
kind of wanted to go and trace the roots of her because when I found out it's not just one woman, right? This is there was one woman that started it, but yet at the
Hmm.
same time, this is kind of an icon that she's a symbol.
Absolutely. So Rosie the Riveter really was the embodiment, and it, in a lot of ways, was the personification of this mass mobilization of what we now know to as the women's workforce. And it really became a PR symbol, and it also became an icon for ladies everywhere because,
Hmm.
with the onset of World War II, you had the entire labor market really in a state of flux because all of the able-bodied men were being drafted to go fight in the war. So now that you had a sizable portion of the male population that was being drafted to go overseas and and fight the Nazis and fight the Japanese, you had a lot of defense industries, and you had a lot of manual and skilled labor jobs that were being unfilled, and the only reasonable alternative at that point was for the women who were the wives and the girlfriends who the soldiers had left behind to take up the reins in the absence of their significant other, and start taking on those jobs in order to help the war effort, and not only that, really also to help the economy and to ultimately achieve victory through the means of an alternative labor force.
Yeah, and isn't this also part of Roosevelt understanding that this was a money-making way to, I mean, that wars lose money, but there's a way to make money. And he seemed to understand that. Was this part of it? Like, hey, we can't lose out and we need ammunition. We need all these things that the women were doing, but it kept the economy flowing, didn't it?
Oh, it did. It did. Yeah, it was very much an economic decision in the sense that Roosevelt said, okay, well, we need to keep the economy moving, and we need to have people behind every one of these assembly lines. We need to have a warm body. We need to have someone with a pulse, and someone with all of their faculties of mind to get behind each one of these positions, and not only turn out the raw materials and the refined weapons that we need to win this war, but also if we put money into the pockets of each one of these new wage earners, then they go out and buy more products, which will put more money into the economy, and therefore more money behind the economic might and the economic power that we need to ultimately declare victory.
Mm. So we have and we go for the victory, but then women had to move out of that back into go home, right?
Yeah.
And women were at that point going, hey, we're not wearing skirts anymore. I'm wearing pants. So it kind of changed fashion too, in a way,
Yeah.
and the way we thought about the women.
Yeah, it was a very interesting time in American history because, here on a very wide scale, for really the first time, you had this mass mobilization of a woman's workforce. We really hadn't seen this any other time in American history prior to this point. It was still very much a traditional culture and a traditional outlook at that point, to where, if you did have a woman in the home and she did have a job, it was purely out of necessity, because the male of the house, he was expected to be the breadwinner, and he was the sole breadwinner. And both parties really subscribed to the traditional gender roles, where you had the man of the house who was the breadwinner, and the ladies stayed home and took care of the house, and she also raised the children. But now, you had a completely different paradigm, wherein the lady was going off to the factory, or she was going off to some job that very often was more than 9 to 5. And they not only did those jobs, but they did them incredibly well. And even after the war ended, a lot of them took pause and said to themselves, well, gosh, you know what? For the better part of 4 years, we've been working these jobs. We've been the sole breadwinners, and we actually kind of like it. A lot of us have gotten some sort of fulfillment in it beyond what the traditional gender roles have always been. So a lot of them, even though they were forced to give up those jobs and those positions, that really set the seed for what we would later, what we would later see in the 1960s and the 1970s, where you had more women going to college and more women taking jobs in various parts of the workforce that were almost exclusively male dominated.
It's fascinating to me, because I think they also created that village of, when they're working, who was watching the kids. So they kind of had like shifts and schedules for them. It's not like they just kind of dumped their kids, but they became this unit. And we've talked a bit before on the show about, like, during Vietnam, Hal Moore's wife, how she, mobilized women together in regards to, and creating a program for when, their husbands and loved ones, were injured or killed at war, and how she, helped the women just personally, but then created a program for them. So it wasn't here, this taxi cab coming up and, your husband's dead. So it's kind of interesting how things really started to shift with this, but, cause that was also real in World War II. How did they know if their loved ones were, killed or injured during that time frame while they're working and raising kids?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I would say that the military as a whole back in World War II, because so much of the country was mobilized behind the fight, that the system of casualty notification was a lot more efficient than we would see in the later parts of the Vietnam War. And, for every casualty that occurred, you would have a casualty response team. And what that would entail would be, it would be a telegram, of course, delivered to the family of the deceased. And it would typically be delivered by a uniformed officer. And very often that officer would be accompanied by a chaplain to help the recently bereaved process through a lot of the raw emotions that they would have upon learning of the news of the death of a family member. And it was never truly a pleasant experience, but it was one that I think they handled with a lot more grace and dignity back in the Second World War. And I wanted to touch on the earlier remark that you made about really taking this as far as a collective enterprise goes, because, a lot of these women did band together, and they did become a collective in the sense that not only would they take shifts watching their children, but a lot of them would carpool together. And it really became a synchronized network of this mutual support.
And I want to kind of step back though from World War II, because I was reading today that I may be wrong on this, but I know this all came together in World War II, and nobody thought World War II was going to happen because World War I was like, holy cow, that stuff really happened. Now we've ended it, right? And then
Right.
no, which we've covered on the show before, but didn't women do this a little bit in World War I too, and just didn't get the notoriety at the time because Norman Rockwell kind of painted this painting, and not kind of, he did, for the Saturday Night Post, and was it Saturday Evening Post? I'm going to get it wrong. But he did a painting, which isn't actually the one that we are all as familiar with, and then there was a song about it, and so PR wise, that propaganda machine that we've talked about before,
Yeah.
this hit the airwaves, so the women across the country, from the artwork and then, being in a publication, hearing this music, it, rallied them up as a unit. But this actually did happen a little bit in World War I, right?
Yeah, that's right. It happened to a lesser extent because if you take a look at America's involvement in World War One, really we were latecomers to the fight. You had America enter the First World War really in what amounted to the last 18 months of the conflict. So, there was a lot of PR and a lot of news generated about the mass mobilization and the American Expeditionary Force going over there to fight. But because our participation in the conflict was really such a flash in the pan, you really didn't get a lot of press space dedicated to what was happening on the home front, at least not to the extent that you would see during World War II.
Mm. So today people are looking at this. This was a labor movement, but it's like now Labor Day is also about honoring those who labor, right? And we
Right.
also look at, there's look at what's going on with the writers' strike and things like that. It's, and what's going on. Amazon's getting, has people go on strike all the time, and Starbucks and all these big companies have these. And I think, and they use Rosie the Riveter, that symbol, as part of it, of like, hey, we can do it, because that was, their slogan, right? Was, we can do it. Come on, girls. We got girl power, but now it's gone a little bit further than that, I think.
Yeah, that's right.
And,
Yeah,
and so, yeah, do you ever have anything like that happen towards the military? Because this was, to me, also interesting. It's a labor movement. Were they hired by the military, or were they under? Because I know the military works with contractors, so that part I wonder about. If, because conditions weren't exactly that sweet. It's factory work, it's drilling, it's dusty, it's dirty. You're breathing in things you probably don't want to. All for a good cause, and it's making money, but I wonder if it was contracted out versus the military paying them,
Right. So, a lot of the paychecks that they drew were actually from the companies that they worked for, and it was all of those individual companies that were contracted to work for the military. It's I guess what most commentators would call the military industrial complex, where you have the Pentagon issuing these need for priorities and all of these different statements of need. And they're saying, okay, well, to any one of you industries out there, if you guys can make this particular machine, or if you can manufacture this particular part for us, here's what we need. Here's what we're offering, please submit to us your bids of how much you think it will cost to produce any of this. And, then whoever's bid gets selected, that's when they go through all the negotiating process. This is handled through this is handled through all of the War Department procurement offices to say, okay, well, if we need to produce like 500 units of this particular weapon, here's what we can pay you over the cost of the production. Here's what we can reimburse you for as far as the time that you've invested into this. And it's from that payment that the company says, okay, well, if we have this chunk of change, say like it's $5 million, then okay, we can afford to pay 20,000 workers X some amount of dollars, not including overtime.
Mm, not including
So
overtime. So I think in a way too with the contractors, it's so that the government doesn't get sued. Ooh, I wonder about that. You know what I mean?
yeah.
Like,
Hmm.
ooh, I don't know if I'm allowed to talk about that. Am I? Secret Service going to come get me? But,
No.
I wonder about that, those conditions. But I think it really, they had that we can do it just like in the military. If you're in battle, isn't that attitude the same thing too? We can do it. Go for it.
Yeah.
That energy has to happen. That synergy, I should say, not just energy, but synergy and teamwork.
Mhm. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
right.
Oh, wow. So, okay. So Rosie gets out there, but
Hmm.
it started with one woman though, right? So one lady, and we're talking women all across the country and of all diverse backgrounds too, right? That's the other thing we need to remember. There's
Yeah.
Rosie the Riveter National Historic Site in California in the Bay Area that I really wanted to go. And one of the eldest National Park Service um, curators was there, and she recently retired, and she was over 100 years old, which I think is amazing. And I believe she was actually a riveter at one point, or she at least knew a lot. But that's the thing. I mean, that's I want people to understand that too. That this was a people coming together regardless of their backgrounds, just like in any war, right?
Sure is. It sure is.
Yeah.
You had an incredibly diverse swath of the population
Mm.
get mobilized for this, and it was incredible to see a lot of them come together. It's in a way it's kind of ironic. They say that necessity is the mother of innovation, and you really saw that play out in the workforce because you had different races and different ethnicities working alongside each other in a lot of these in a lot of these defense jobs, and you really didn't see that in years prior.
Hmm.
And the more that they came together for the sake of satisfying the country's manpower needs, you started to see more and more people working alongside each other. And that really, I think, was one of the things that started to break down a lot of the preconceived notions that people had about race. I think it was one of the many things that made it easier for the civil rights movement to gain traction in the way that it did a decade
I
later.
think you really because Jim Crow stuff has been around, right, forever.
Yeah.
Um, and obviously look at what our country is going through now. But
Mhm.
I was looking at pictures like women in Tuskegee, and I think about these black women in the South going out there at the same time. Really, some other really horrible things were happening to them, and it's just this weird era. And you think about that. I just have this thing. Can we do a thing on the Tuskegee Airmen at some point?
Of
I find
course.
I just they're badass, And then when they got over to different countries, they were accepted more than what they were accepted here, which is heartbreaking. Um,
Mhm.
and they fought. It's just like the Buffalo Soldiers and all the Native Americans who fought side by side, with us that came into this country going, "Hey, this is ours now." You know, but the Tuskegee Airmen, I saw a woman. It was on Wikipedia. And I'll put this probably in this and um, on the website or something. But a black lady out there with the little dookie. What do you call dookie is a South Africanism. What do you call it? Like the bandana on their heads, right? And here she
Yeah.
was, doing this, and you got to think about going from slavery, which I'm sorry, just it takes time going all the way through then to now. Um, it takes time, and then here you are side by side, maybe with women that were, not exactly nice to them before. And now suddenly you have to unite. And, um, and I just think especially, in certain regions of this country, um, there was a lot of change that had to happen and change takes time. And, when I see that one picture, that woman in Tuskegee doing it, I was like, wow, You've got to think of that, and here's this iconic image of this white woman who's not even real. Well, she was, you know what I mean? Started with one woman, but it's an icon. It's an image and it's white. But what about the black women? I'm just saying, you know what I mean? Um,
Right.
so there was a lot of black women doing this too. So I just want to give them a shout out because they could have said, screw y'all. You guys weren't that nice to me at this time. And now, my husband's off, fighting as well. But everyone unified because of the greater evil, right?
Mhm.
Unity on the greater evil. Um, but I think that's something to think about of, you know, the black culture going through so many different things. And then, hey, I'm going to fight alongside these women that at one point were kind of maybe turning their nose. Maybe they weren't. Everybody's different, right? So I'm not
Mhm.
generalizing, but of course I have to do a little bit of that. But I think that's pretty cool. And do you think it changed for the soldiers too? Um, once you're together fighting the enemy, that it really didn't matter about the color of your skin at that point. I mean, there's going to still be stuff, right? But at the end of the
Right.
day, don't people have to unify at some point?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And it, and I think in a lot of ways that was one of the things that really precipitated the desegregation of the armed forces. Because, here we had this long 4 year struggle and you had a lot of segregated units, who fought valiantly and, were absolutely critical to the outcome of the war. And, it wasn't but a few years after World War II ended that now President Harry Truman comes along and says, okay, well, if Americans of every color fought so valiantly to defeat the Axis, then there's no reason why we should even keep them segregated. And I also think I think it's ironic and humorous at the same time that the U.S. military desegregated before American society as a whole did, because you had the desegregation of the armed forces in 1948, and it wasn't until the end of the 1960s that we finally saw the abolition of Jim Crow, and you had the civil rights movement reach critical mass.
But when we think about it, this was before the end of the Jim Crow era. So that is
Yeah,
pretty novel about
yeah.
everyone coming together.
Hmm.
Um, and so I know the Tuskegee Airmen made some history, right?
Hmm.
But what about the rest of the country? What about the rest of the women? I mean, were there specific areas where the women were working in these plants?
Oh yeah, yeah. There absolutely were. So you had I can just name a few examples off my head.
Hmm.
So if we wind the clocks back to 1942, I think one of the more prominent factories that was staffed almost exclusively by female line workers was the Douglas Aircraft Company. They were in Long Beach, California. And, you had certain sections of every part of the assembly line where you saw women line workers who were operating lathes, and they were installing some critical components to the aircraft themselves. And, it was very common to see female line workers, but
Hmm.
you still had male supervisors. You had all of these first line supervisors and these mid-level managers who were still men at the time. And, yeah, it made for an interesting dynamic. And if you read some of the oral histories that a lot of these Rosies have left behind, they, they commented that, working in any number of these factories and, being a Rosie, quote unquote, for however many years they were on the job actually led to them meeting their future husbands, because you have a few who admitted, yeah, I went to work at the Douglas Aircraft Company, or I went to work
Oh,
for
wow.
Boeing, or or I went to work for North American, and yeah, my first line supervisor put me through orientation on the first day, and about 6 months later, we were on our honeymoon. So, yeah.
Wow. Wow. So yeah, I mean, things move quickly, huh?
Hmm.
Yeah, a lot of people got married real quick, huh? I was like,
Yeah,
oh, we met each other and like, hey, you never know what's going to happen. Do it now. And do you think there was also that just out of worry of pregnancy too?
probably.
Like,
Yeah,
because there were shenanigans. And I know that after World War II, there's a lot of shenanigans because
right.
people were so happy. And then it was like all these babies were born like, 9 months
All the
after
baby
V-Day.
boomers.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. It's this, hello, here we are. They have a name for this, right? For real, for a real reason. But yeah, you kind of got to think about that. And I think it's an interesting time because it was supposed to be the world that ended all, the war that ended all wars. And then the second one was the same thing. And then here comes Vietnam. And do you think people were kind of tired? And what did the women think at that point? Because people were getting to the martini lunches and it was like the Mad Men Society came up, right? After that.
Hmm.
And so if you think about the women and the workforce, how it changed from suddenly women were in the workforce more and there's been a lot of laws that have had to pass over that now too. So, it's kind of an interesting thing that has transpired from Rosie the Riveter on. Did other countries do this? I gotta just before I get to that. What about the
Oh
other
yeah.
countries and their women? Because as I recall, like, in certain countries like Israel, like the women actually joined the military, didn't they?
Oh, of
I
course.
mean,
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, and World War II was an incredibly interesting time for women all across the Allied front because in other Allied nations you had women who were taking up jobs back home while the men went overseas to fight. But one that really stands out for a number of reasons was the latter-day Soviet Union, and the Soviets
mm,
were incredibly interesting among all the Allied countries because unlike the Western Allies, the Soviets didn't have any formal restrictions on women in combat. And even though they tried to discourage women from joining, they did not formally prohibit it. They said, hey, whether you're a guy or a girl, if you want to fight for Mother Russia, by all means you can. And
mhm.
you had the Soviets really stand out among the Allies because they had so many women who were fighting on the front lines. Now, of course, they fought within their own segregated units, but still, you had these all female units who were performing valiantly, and not only that, were striking fear into the hearts of the Germans. And there are quite a few examples if you just look at various parts of the Soviet history of World War II, where you have female fighters distinguishing themselves. You had for instance, there was a top scoring female Soviet sniper. You of course had the members of the Night Witches, were
That's
the
part.
notorious bomber squadron who were
Yeah, you
staffed
talk
entirely
about them
by
in one of your
female.
books. Yeah, I
Yeah,
remember them. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So it really went to show that regardless of your gender, if you were sincere about performing a mission and you weren't interested in trying to prove some greater point of gender politics, that you know you could you could accomplish a particular mission when the chips were down and the odds were stacked against you, and your only goal was to try to rid the world of this qualitative evil that was known as the Axis powers. Because in the Soviet Union, even after VE Day, you saw a return to normalcy that was very analogous along the lines of what you saw in the US. I mean,
Mm.
you had these women fighter pilots, these women bomber pilots who all did their jobs very well, but after the war was over, a lot of them went back to their traditional gender roles and really didn't think much of it at the time. But almost in
Mm.
tandem, you see a subtle push towards, well, hey, we fought this incredible evil in World War II, so let's make more exceptions for women wanting to be in the workforce. And right around the time when I guess you could say the first of the women's lib movement popped up in the early 60s here in the US. Meanwhile, across the pond on the other side of the Iron Curtain, you had the celebration of the first female Soviet cosmonaut. And you had other female firsts within the Soviet Union at that point as well.
So, it's interesting too, because I wonder how many women went to it out of just getting out of even a situation that they may be in that they weren't happy in. Maybe a family situation or something like that where they're like, I'm out of here. I'm going to go do this. I believe in the country, but maybe not my situation. I need
Right.
to do something. And this was a different opportunity. I mean, I know that happens. I mean, we talked about this, like Lee Marvin and stuff. He's like, hell yeah, I'm going in there. I know how to do this stuff. Even, Coyote Recon, J.D. Vanderpool is kind of like that too, right? He's like,
Yeah.
this stuff ain't working here. I've got an opportunity there that I know I can be a badass in. So I wonder about the women doing it too, where they're like, I need like, women's lib is a real thing. And what if, they were in some little town that, you're not getting anywhere. And this was a way of, I'm doing something and people could give you the nod to get out of town, you know?
Hmm.
I wonder if that happened with
Exactly.
Rosie
Yeah.
the Riveters and, the Riveters, I shouldn't just say Rosie, but the Riveters as well as, all these pilots and people that started fighting, these women that started getting into wars, whether they're making
Mhm.
ammunition or shooting it. The Russians are badass.
Yeah.
What book was that? Which one was that? Was that Skybreak or a different one?
No, that
No, not
was
Skybreak. No, it was
a,
the,
Air War on the Eastern Front.
that's right. That's right. Yeah.
Mhm.
Skybreak was a Desert Storm, but yeah, it's amazing to me, and I think some women got themselves out of places they didn't want to be
Mhm.
by using it. Why not?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, go for it while you can. But as a unit, like here in this country, women working together, I know, you know, I grew up in obviously a different time, right? In a different place, but like if I think back to high school days and stuff, it was kind of, I feel like Africa was a little bit different, not as modernized as here in my
Mhm.
growing up times. And there's no way you were going to get away with anything because the women all knew each other and would just go through the backyard. Everybody had the backyard gate. I mean, this was in England too. It was like that. There was just that era where the women all knew each other down the street. They would gossip too and have tea together and, so and so did this. And everybody knew each other's scandals and dramas but the kids were always watched after. If they're playing in your yard, everybody knows, all of that. There was this like, if you're on a street, everybody knew what you were doing. All the moms knew and they visited each other. They did laundry together. They, not taught younger women how to bake a cake or, you know, they helped each other. There was this network of
Mhm.
women and it wasn't just the Dutch versus the British or anything. I'm just saying in general, um, I saw that a lot growing up of this network of women in South Africa, especially just in that era of where being aware of it, going, wow, that's not what it looks like in American magazines. You know what I mean? American magazines, women were, because in South Africa, when we landed in South Africa, Nancy and I went into a hotel bar, restaurant area. It's a restaurant bar and she got kicked out because she was a female.
Really?
And
Huh.
oh yeah, we had their segregation was not just black and white. It was men and women. Men had their own restaurant sections versus women. So there was segregation at that time. And, as a kid, you can run between people's legs and do whatever you want. But, for women, she was shunned and we had to go and leave the restaurant. And you go over here where the women have tea. And so it was a little bit, I don't want to say backwards because none of these women were backwards, but we had that kind of era when I was growing up and it was very difficult. Nancy is very, I'm American, I'll do what I want. At the same time, was very open culturally in cultural diversity that wasn't there. So it was a very interesting time for us to live there and see what was going on with women and progression because women were getting jobs. In my era, when I graduated high school, a lot of my friends went off and got married and had kids and then there's a whole side of us that said, no, we're doing this. We're opening businesses. We're doing this, So it was kind of, I think our era was kind of at that time where women were changing what they were doing and being a little bit more progressive. And, like even, we didn't have internet, right? We didn't have TV like you have in the States. We didn't have that. We had, a few hours a day that was in our language and it had to share like TV time was shared with different languages and you had maybe 1 to 3 channels. When we left, we had 3 channels. So your communication radio was always a big deal. And I think that was that thing with the song for Rosie the Riveter, that song and, the magazines and publications. I think that's what really spurred the women on because they would sit and read an article together and have that cup of tea at the kitchen table. The kitchen table is everything to women, man. Everybody needs a kitchen table. That's where everything gets hashed out. You get a cup of tea, put the kettle on. You could tell when a friend would walk in, oh, put the kettle on. Stuff's going down. What's happening? The kettle goes on. It's an endless kettle. Tea is endless and cake is endless and sandwiches is endless. But that's what it was like. And I kind of identify with these women just over that upbringing and that, seeing the women, that were older than me, obviously, my mom's age and everything, just kind of looking up going, wow, and you don't mess with them either. They were hardcore, they may not have had, voting rights at that point either. I don't think actually. I know Nancy never had voting rights when we lived outside the country, right? Makes sense. But doesn't mean that they didn't have power. You know what I mean? For women. But I think Rosie the Riveter probably had to go over to different countries to empower other women beyond here. Do you think just even with music that it got on the radio waves and stuff that other women heard?
Yeah. I mean, not only the music, but, but also the pop culture icons, a lot of the, popular art, everyone's familiar with everyone's familiar with the popular image of Rosie the Riveter. She's wearing those blue coveralls and has the red bandana and, she's flexing her biceps saying we can do it. I mean, is that is an image that is known the world over. And I think it has a universal appeal in that sense. So, yeah.
Yeah. It started with Norman Rockwell and it was, he heard the song. So Rosie the Riveter song came out before his image. And then he did it for the Saturday Evening Post. I got to get it right here when we're talking about stuff. But then somebody else went and redid it because of copyrights and it was J. Howard Miller who did the one that we all know. But I mean, it's kind of, it's amazing, man. So the power of music and imagery, right? And how it can spread. That's and right. Women I swear it's the tea table. It's kitchen table. Like, don't you think? I mean, did you have that growing up? The kitchen table as a centerpiece. So you know what I mean? I don't think it's gone. It's just a good place. Everybody needs the kitchen table. I think this country needs to bring it back. Everybody has their bars and islands and their kitchens and everything, just feel like sometimes, some of that older stuff needs to come back for people to be comfortable to communicate and let go of things, and, there's always the pot of tea, yeah, it's fun memories, but, this is awesome. So do you think with this movement, do you think that it spurred and helped movements like Cesar Chavez and other labor movements in history that the Rosie the Riveters gave like an inspiration to someone like Cesar Chavez? Obviously, he was born in Yuma, Arizona, and obviously ended up in the Central California Valley working, and all he wanted really was for a better tool for people to be able to cut vegetables and harvest better. So it wasn't killing them and hurting them.
Right.
Um,
Yeah. Well, I think what it did was it created a good PR reference point for a lot of the labor movements that we would see rise up in the late 40s and all throughout the 50s. And I think what it did in a roundabout way was say, okay, well, here you had a labor movement that was born of necessity. You included a demographic that was previously thought of in one capacity, but they showed themselves to do something in a completely different capacity. So now that we have a clear data point where we can say, hey, these group of people contributed to the war effort and they defied a lot of common stereotypes. Well, we use that as a reference point for our own movement to say, well, hey, here's another labor issue that needs to be resolved. Here's something that can be pointed to have a qualitative benefit for the country as a whole, and the individuals, all of the building blocks of this movement are people who also belong to a demographic that is not particularly well thought of. Well, hey, don't count us out. Give us our dignity and give us our day in court, just like you did to Rosie the Riveter back in World War II.
yeah, yeah, I think it does. I think because women were underserved at that time, and I think back in, going back to the black women serving and at the time in our country, and then we had the Jim Crow era. I mean, it was even, am I getting it? I'm getting my eras wrong. Please correct me. Like when I think
Oh,
about
you're
the Little
good.
Rock Nine going to school, then
Yeah.
segregation in schools, was that right after this? This was after, right? Yeah, this was
hmm
after, more in the 60s, 70s, right?
Yeah. So Jim Crow came about really in the wake of the Civil War, and it lasted all the way until the end of the 1960s. So,
That's crazy. So this was
yeah.
going on at the time.
hmm
And the segregation in schools, I mean, we went to the Little Rock School, high school, and which is the only
Yeah.
school in a National Park Service that's an actual working school where
hmm
kids go to school. And it's sobering. I mean, and they've got like the old gas station next to it.
Yeah.
And you can go to the visitor center and everything, but go to the actual school. And it's like, and you think about what did the parents think knowing their kids are they're walking in and, the white kids are going after them and, the school staff wasn't that great. And, we had a great president who said that's enough. And, they stood up and I think we may have one or two alive, I think still. But if you think of that time frame, right, it's not that far away from, what happened with Rosie the Riveter series. Like here's these women out there showing we can do stuff in all colors. I don't think they got as much, the black women didn't, and I'm sure there's other, races and cultures involved too. So I'm not trying to generalize. But I don't think they got their time of day as much as the white women did. But at least they were there, and I think they probably locally got no, you know what I mean, local understanding. And but you've got to think what those women were going through too at that time. There was, really bad things happening to women in small towns, medically, eugenics, and I don't want to get into the whole thing of that, but it was all around the same time frame, within 20 years. These women, I mean, I just kind of go like, and these women still put their lives, not their lives on the line, their husbands did, but they still did stuff. And I think that's something very noble to think about. If you come to a country through slavery, your generations go through all this, right? And now there's a world war. Sure, you're going to come together on things, but it seems to me like they did stand up again. And we should remember that about these different cultures of people that didn't always choose to be here, but they stood up for us. Just like the indigenous, like the Navajo code talkers, we've talked about that. And in the Civil War, the Native Americans and the black people and the Buffalo soldiers that fought, so I think there's just something to think about, like people standing up even in the face of personal adversity, cultural adversity, and still doing something for their country. I think that's very brave, and
Yeah.
honorable. Um, yeah, it just kind of got me with that picture of Rosie the Riveter, because it's always that super icon. I'm like, oh, this is cool. Someone is showing the other side, you know? So not going on a tangent. I'm just saying, just saying, because women's liberation is women's liberation, right? And we showed that, and then we got to wear pants, and then all of a sudden people were having martini lunches and dinners, and then shenanigans happened after that kind of thing, and then we now need to have more rights for women as things go, as we can see that it's a never-ending struggle, right? So yeah, it's interesting to see women's revolution. You know, it's a women's revolution, I think. I don't,
Yeah.
would you say that's the right word? That's not the right word because they didn't need to, well, they helped. They didn't revolt. They
Yeah.
helped.
Yeah. Well, I'd say it was a revolution in the, yeah, well, I would say it's a revolution in the broadest sense of the term. I mean, because it doesn't always necessarily mean that there's a revolt behind it. It just means that something is rapidly changing, and it's unexpected, and it goes against what an established cultural norm is.
Mm. For the greater good.
Yeah.
Yeah. That taught some lessons there. Very
Hmm.
cool, Mike. Good to have you back on. Everyone, MikeGuardia.com is the website to go to. How many books is it? 24, 25? Got to keep me up to date on this.
Yeah, it
21?
is an even 25. Yeah.
It is 25. Yeah, because then I
Uh-huh.
go 21. I think I still want to be 21. That's why.
Me too.
I was on a panel chat today, and the lady said, "Yeah, we're all in the same, age group." And I'm like, "Really?" Like, I'm like, okay, I'm 21. I thought I was still 21. What are you talking about? I was like, what do you mean, Willis? Like what's going on with that? But, 25 is good. And tell everybody what's coming up next.
Alrighty. So yeah, have two more projects in the hopper. One is very, very close to being completed. That's the story of the combat engineers in Vietnam. And then after that, there's another book on the horizon that is a that deals with a what I think is an oft overlooked part of modern military history. It's about the spy war in Bosnia.
Mm, okay. So that's going to be cool. Spy. Yep. We want to know about spies. Yeah. And then you got to think, we have spies today, don't we, Mike? Like
Yeah, we do.
what, like what's going on between Ukraine and Russia right now?
Of course. Yeah,
There's
I mean,
spies running around, right?
hmm yep. I mean, at any given moment, you will have more than a few handful of spies from any number of countries infiltrating borders, all around the world. The game of espionage is just this big never ending network of spy versus spy, and trying to get their hands on the most viable piece of information they can to help out their home country and to help stay ahead in the game.
I wonder how much of it comes from oligarchs, around the world. Like, and then a government has to go against really huge, like people with huge amounts of money, like that we can't even think. You know what I mean? How much they have. And how do you outdo someone like that has that much money? I wonder about that these days. Like when you have that many oligarchs, I mean, how many billionaires we have in this country right now? I'm like, wow, that's pretty. I mean, we have over 1,000 billionaires, I think it is. Was that 1,000 or 10,000? And I think that's a lot. It used to be, growing up, didn't you always think there was like one or two or maybe five, 10 was big? Now we got that many. So how does a government go after those people, you know, and have the funding for it through spies and everything? You know what I mean? Because you have to kind of look the part, be the part. Maybe I'm just in movie land playing James Bond in my mind. Is that what's going on? I'm just,
No, no.
it's
So,
real.
yeah, yeah. If you're part of a clandestine service, there's a lot of money and training that goes into it. You can send spies out to do any number of things across borders, But you do run into that problem, and it's pretty much just like you mentioned. They have to look the part, they have to speak a language fluently, and some people can pull it off to the point where they can pass themselves off as native speakers, and they can blend in so well. Um, for I think for the normal person, and even for a number of people who go through spy training, there's only so much that you can pull off. So what a lot of spy networks do is they cultivate sleeper cells within the existing borders. Say, like, you want to have a spy ring that's in Armenia. Well, there are a few people that you can think of who are readily available who convincingly look the part to pass as an Armenian, and people who can speak the language fluently enough to fool even the most astute native speaker. So instead of putting an agent on the ground from your own country to try and pose as one, what you do is you cultivate a network of disaffected Armenians within the borders already. Say someone who saw his family thrown into a political prison. Well, he's disgruntled, he hates the government, but oh yeah, there's a spy handler from the U.S. who wants to keep sending this guy money, and say, okay, well, hey, in exchange for money and protection from the U.S., go ahead and spy on your own government. Try and get as close to the action as you can, and send us as much information as you can. And you really saw a lot of that going on throughout the Cold War. You had these homegrown spies on both sides of the Iron Curtain. You would have CIA and KGB operatives, trying to activate these homegrown sleeper cells, say, hey, there's some guy in America who's willing to sell us secrets. Well, send a KGB or two guy to contact him and try and funnel those secrets back to the Kremlin. And for our part, we were doing the same things. We were trying to bribe a lot of Russian officials to give us as much pertinent information as they had access to.
Yeah, I mean, you have to, right? I mean, that's what it's about. But it goes back to even what I was saying about people going towards something because they have nothing to lose. Do you know what I mean? And in a place of war, and they're good at something, they've got a technique. They maybe, like, I'm just going to use Lee Marvin again. He's cool. He had techniques. Coyote Recon, J.D. Vanderpool, same thing, had these techniques and this practice and these skills. I should say skills is the word. And if you can be stealth and read body language, whether it's animals or people, it's the same thing, right? You can be pretty deadly, and have emotional intelligence. I think that's the thing. Emotional intelligence is huge and hard.
Yes.
It's huge and difficult. I mean, if we all kind of subscribe to emotional intelligence, the world would be a lot better. But it's, we have emotion that messes up the emotional intelligence, but there's no place for that, right? Yet at the same time, it's part of the fire and the adrenaline that moves things forward, So, wow. Good conversation as always, Mike. Everyone, again, I'm just going to give everyone the latest books again. So go get them. The Combat Diaries, True Stories from the Front Lines of World War II, and Coyote Recon. You got to read that and say, watch it, read it. It should be a movie. Nancy and I both say that Coyote Recon should be a movie. Can you do that, please? Yeah.
If only I could get inroads into Hollywood and get.
Well, I think they need writers right now. I mean, I'm thinking about that. It's like, hello, people. There's a bunch of authors with a lot of stories out there, but at the same time, I stand with the workers too, the actual writers that are not getting, I don't know, it's getting weird with AI,
Yeah.
It's going to be a weird time of things moving forward. It's going to be an interesting time. But everyone, again, Coyote Recon, The Forgotten Wars of Colonel J.D. Vanderpool. You got to get that book. And again, Mike is on Amazon, but you can also go to MikeGuardia.com. He's here every first Monday talking military history and all kinds of other topics that we throw at him. He manages to handle. So he's got it. He's got emotional intelligence. Thank you so much, Mike. It's been a pleasure.
Well, thank you so much, Lisa. It is always a pleasure to be on the show.